Welcome to Automotive EV. My name is Peter Wooding and thank you for joining us. Today we have another great session lined up for you. This particular series is part of our Outbound Series 2, Episode 4, where we're covering Mexico. And we're delighted to have really four excellent speakers. So I'll introduce you by first name, Christian name first, because you're going to introduce yourselves anyway. So a big thank you to Susanne for joining us. Alex, who is coming up as Cassie, but he really is Alex. And also Roberto. And last but by no means least, your host and moderator for the panel is Dennis. So I'm delighted to hand over to you, Dennis, and I will remain sort of in the background. So thank you.
Right. Thanks, Peter. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be watching this. We have a great panel discussion today. We have great panelists for you. And it's one of my favorite topics. I love talking about outbound in our industry. I love talking with industry experts. And then Mexico is one of my favorite topics because there's always so many unique challenges there and so many unique opportunities. So just a quick thank you to my panelists for volunteering today to join me, because I know everybody has a lot of busy things going on. So what I would like each of our panelists to do is just to introduce themselves and share with the people watching this series. Just give me 30, 60 seconds on what your role and responsibility is in your company. So let's start with Susanne, Dr. Susanne Lehmann. Thank you. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dennis and Peter, for having me. Thanks, Roberto and Alex, for joining me here. My role actually is in the Volkswagen Group to be the responsible senior director for production in North America, including the factories in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in Puebla, Mexico, and also for our engine factory in Silao in northern Mexico, and of course the components. So it's actually pretty challenging. We will speak about that. We are doing production steering. We are doing also digitalization of production. And of course, all the planning coordination in the region in North America, ramp-ups of projects, but last but not least, of course, also all the outbound, all the cars going from Mexico to the US and Canada, but also Latin America, Europe, and all the imports of beautiful Audis and Porsches into NAR. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you so much. Roberto, how about you?
Thank you, Dennis. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for the opportunity, for the invitation, Peter, Dennis. Great to see you again, Susanne, Alex. My name is Roberto Zavala. I'm a Vice President Operations for Wallenius Wilhelmsen in Mexico. So I'm overall responsible for our logistics business in Mexico, where we have operations across 14 facilities. Most of them plant-based facilities. So I'm really familiar with the challenges that some of the challenges that Susanne was mentioning. Really happy to be here and looking forward to a great discussion.
Thanks, Roberto. And Alex, if you would, please.
Sure. So thank you very much, Dennis and Peter, for having me again, and for Dr. Lehmann and Roberto Zavala for joining me on this panel. My name is Alex Macgregor with TransDevelopment Group. We've been involved in designing and developing the finished vehicle logistics facilities in the United States since 1987 and in Mexico since 1993. So we've worked with a number of OEMs, including Volkswagen at both Puebla and in Chattanooga, as well as processors like Wallenius, Wilhelmsen, rail lines, port authorities, you name it. So we're excited to be here and talking with you all today.
Right, thank you. And Peter, I always forget to introduce myself, so I assume everybody knows me, but we know that's not true. But for those I don't happen to know, I'm Dennis Manns. I was with American Honda for 30 years, about 20 years on the sales side and 11, 12 years on the distribution logistics side. And so my last role was responsible for all the plants and ports in North America. So have a lot of friends in the industry, and here's 4 of them today. And it's a pleasure to spend time talking about our industry. But anyway, thanks for joining me. So Roberto, let me start off with you, and because you handle a lot of the brands in the United States and in Mexico, and you're based in Mexico, and so let me lead off with you and kind of ask you. So what are the different challenges that make Mexico a little bit unique in with all the different brands that you handle?
Well, there's many, right? But if I had to choose one now, what's been the beginning of 2021 is definitely the related to the industry challenges for the lack of the chips to assemble vehicles, those semiconductors, and that's affecting the production. So just from a vehicle processing standpoint, a big challenge for us has been to maintain a trained and talented workforce. Shutdowns are happening, production shutdowns are happening, and at most of the assembly plants in Mexico, there isn't a single facility where we do not have an issue or has been affected. And shutdowns can last for months. They can last for days. Sometimes it's a day or two. And we see how our partners, our customers are dealing with the situation and trying their best to accommodate those chips that they have available in their hot selling vehicles. Maybe we're seeing how recently there's also a trend where they're going to build them and hold them, as opposed to a shutdown. So that's just created a lot of challenges. Just for instance, what I was saying about people with the shutdowns and having to keep your workforce when there's an extended shutdown. Companies, OEMs, suppliers, they have to keep costs down, and that means folks working. They're not gonna receive as much as they would receive when there's full production, and then it becomes also a labor concern, a labor issue to keep them with you and to keep that talent that you have been building for many years. I think if I had to pinpoint one, that would be key, and also now with what I was saying of producing and then holding. Maybe that's going to create some capacity issues, from a yard capacity standpoint. You're going to build some vehicles and then wait for those chips to be ready before they can be shipped. Then there's going to be capacity issues, and we're already helping our customers and seeing how they look for additional yards or additional capacity is starting to grow, right? So I would say, if I had to pick one, that is a key issue for Q1 2021.
Absolutely, and that's a big. Richard, Peter, can we swap the images with Peter and I? Because is that possible? Peter, you with me there? Okay, because I see Peter, but am I on the screen too?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry. So Roberto, so you kind of got your hands around the COVID thing, and so we're kind of understanding how to deal with managing those issues, and then the CPU thing was dropped in everybody's lap worldwide, not just Mexico but worldwide, and so you had a challenge with the COVID labor, and now you've got challenges with the CPU on the labor side also.
Yeah, we had that perhaps naive feeling that 2020 ended strong,
right?
Production, sales, and I think we were a little naive in thinking 2021 is just going to start strong, and as we were dealing with that, then the lack of components hit, and then suddenly you're facing a challenge, as you just said, a challenge on top of another challenge, which is the pandemic is not over by no means. In Mexico, we had safety protocols. We were able to operate in a safe way, but now, again, you're having to address labor issues, concerns, and this is of course the case for us as suppliers, just as perhaps more difficult for OEMs to address this challenge.
Yeah. Susanne, Volkswagen, kind of similar issues, challenges?
Oh, we are super fine, of course. No, of course, we are facing the same conditions of the actual situation, but perhaps I can add a little bit to what is specific in Mexico. Of course, we have a very active volcano, Mount Popocatépetl, which is sometimes blowing ashes over my beautiful cars. Of course, this is the special conditions, or like special, they call it tezontle, stones that are flying around, very lightweight, but very dangerous for car paintings. We have very long distances. We have very many places on a very high and ultraviolet rays coming in, of course, also damaging cars. We have very hard conditions in the ports like Veracruz and Lázaro Cárdenas, which we are actually working with for exports and imports. And still we have a lot of vandalism, especially on the trains going north. So these, I think, sorry, Roberto, but I want to add as non-pandemic, but Mexico-specific issues that we are facing here. And this is what makes it so challenging. I really love Mexico, but it's a big, big challenge for outbound vehicles.
Yeah.
So
there's not a normal day in Mexico. There's
no.
always.
Yeah. So what we also face with the pandemic, I think we have to really stress that is, this is not Europe, this is not the US. So if people don't work, not mine, but most of them don't eat, no pay, no nothing. And this is also a very important socio-political fact that we are facing here and that we try to mitigate. We are talking, of course, with governments. We are talking also with our suppliers, with our service suppliers to help us at least reduce a little bit the pain and the very, very difficult situation also for the workforce. And of course, we have to keep the talent. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the finished vehicle industry that we're all in is such a challenging environment. But in Mexico, it's even ramped up a couple extra levels, you know, because there's nuances. And as you're mentioning, there's nuances there that maybe in the US you don't deal with, or in Europe, but in Mexico, there's nuances you have to deal with just to keep things moving smoothly, right? So. No doubt. Alex, turning to you. So what are some of the big needs you see on the terminal side in Mexico?
So the terminal side's funny because we always build and design the terminals for when things are normal and when they're going well. And I think the last couple of years have been anything but normal, as we've seen, of course. But to just kind of revert back to the normal situation in Mexico, perhaps 2019, which is where we kind of think of our terminal network being built towards. I guess just want to run through a little bit of what the background in Mexico is, and that's just that it's a heavily import and export oriented country. I was looking through some of the statistics, and you've got about 3.8 million vehicles built each year in Mexico, but only about 500,000 of those are sold in Mexico. All the rest get exported. In addition, you've got 800,000 vehicles that are imported into Mexico. So if you look at the whole supply chain for the finished vehicle side, almost 90% of the vehicles that are in the supply chain in Mexico are either going in or out of the country. So then on the terminal side, we look at the big question of how do these vehicles get in and out of Mexico? And you see about 1 million of them go through the port of Veracruz, huge, extremely important port. All the other ports of Mexico, Lázaro Cárdenas, Mazatlán, Altamira, Tuxpan, and so on, handle about another 1 million. So then that leaves 2 million vehicles that go over the US border by rail. So when we discuss terminal networks in Mexico, it's important to remember that there are huge flows moving over a lot of different routes. And as Susanne was mentioning, there are a lot of disruptions associated with all these different options. Ship schedules and weather, vandalism of trucks and trains, overcapacity, volcanoes. So it means that OEMs have to change course frequently between different options. And what that's meant is that a lot of the terminal developments in Mexico have been very large VDC compounds, vehicle distribution center compounds, outside of a lot of the manufacturing plants where you can store 10, 20, 30,000 cars sometimes. And I guess with that in mind, I wanted to think about what we could use as some solutions. And I think we need to see some terminal capacity geared towards multiple users, towards redundancy and robustness in the network, and that suit multiple different movements, whether it's being imported to a port and then shipped by rail to final destination, whether it's going by rail to the United States, either import or export, given the dynamic and ever-changing nature of the market there.
Wow, very good. Thank you. Susanne, can you kind of speak to all of that, talking about your overall logistics network with the plants and the ports and the trains and the trucks and so, issues and challenges in regards to some of those concerns?
Yes, and sorry, Alex, I have to disagree a little bit, not with what you said. It's the truth. We have a lot of parking spaces, VDCs, however you want to call it, but my strategy has been a little bit different. I don't want to store cars. I want the cars to move. I want to sell. I don't want them sitting there under the heavy sun or heavy wind, salted water storms in Veracruz. I don't want that. I want them to get out as soon, as fast as possible. So this is a little bit what I have been able to do. Thanks God we have a super team, we have super partners in you also. The cars should move. And this is my strategy. This is why I have opened other ports like Lázaro Cárdenas. I have flexibilized the network topology, and I am shutting down parking spaces. I don't want space to have the cars sitting there. And this is a kind of different strategy. I have been able to reduce aging cars, as we unfortunately call it, in our yards by 110% from 2019 on until now. And so
dwell is bad. Dwell is bad, huh?
Well, it's bad, exactly. Yeah. And of course, it has been a strategy in earlier years to fight against all those really heavy challenges that we have here by building parking spaces. I changed the strategy.
Yeah, when I was in my Honda role, I mean, it's, you look at aged inventory and you look at dwell at each of your facilities, and every facility has a number. And so I commend you for, getting your hands on that, because, each car is an asset with a dollar value of X, whatever that is. And now red wine is good to age, right? Cars are not good at aging, is what I've always said. And so in your role, it's awesome that you focused on that, because movement of the product, whether it's out of your plant or out of the port or what have you, you got to put your hands around that. So that's a great job for you. And so the guy who does a lot of it is Roberto. Roberto, what about dwell time? Is that a number that's, I guess, growing because of the CPUs? But normally you guys are pretty good about moving that stuff out, huh?
Yeah, and just starting to Susanne, I know she also started shipping from ports, right? Directly from the port, and that's a trend that we saw for a number of years, especially for smaller, I would say, OEMs in the marketplace. And the biggest challenge was the vehicles need to be sold already when they're arriving for you to be able to ship. But I don't know the details of Susanne's strategy. It's not my point, but I think the analysis we've made, just from a purely economical perspective, it makes more sense, right? Also from a distribution cost, to ship from the port directly to the dealers as opposed to storing the vehicles. I think it's a bold move. It's good. The complexity increases because vehicles need to be sold, and that's not always the case for companies that sell a lot of vehicles in Mexico, right? So it's a great team effort, a good strategy. It's a bold move, and I think, from a dwelling perspective, vehicle movement, of course, it's a good step to take.
Yeah. So Susanne, you're Senior VP of Sales in the United States. Ray McKitchick, you know Ray? Yeah, so he and I are friends. We worked at Honda together, right? And
Cool.
so
Yeah.
Ray and I talk about this, but whether it's Volkswagen or any of the other brands, there's so much demand on the retail side for product. And so moving product through the pipeline, whether it's Volkswagen or whatever brand you want to talk about, is so mission critical. But Ray and I just had this discussion a week or two ago when we were chatting on the phone. So Alex, let me switch to you real quick. And so one of the great things about TransDevelopment, you guys are so creative when looking at your customers' existing facilities or looking at opportunities in the marketplace. And so my question to you, so is there anything TransDevelopment has going on that might help Susanne or other people like in her position within the Mexico market? Anything you got that you're working on?
So my big initiative lately down in Mexico has been on a project that's actually a partnership with a company called CIPSA in the Bajío region. And our idea is to establish an origin destination facility near Querétaro. Now, this is a little bit unusual for TransDevelopment. We normally work as a developer either for an OEM or railroad or port or something, as I mentioned earlier. We're actually just finishing up the Toyota facility that's very close to this location that I'm talking about in central Mexico. But the reason we were attracted to this location and the partnership with CIPSA is it's one of the first sites that we've come across in about 30 years working in Mexico that has a lot of the constraints like land ownership, permitting, rail access, road access, and utilities definitively taken care of before we get our customer commitments. And that's because there's an existing transloading facility at this location where there's expansion land ready for automotive. And this means that we can get in and develop on a fast timeline and at a reasonable cost a new greenfield vehicle distribution center, which I think, as I mentioned earlier, we see the need to handle a lot of different vehicle flows flexibly, and especially facilitating exports to the United States. So we see this as a project that can handle inbound rail, outbound rail, port rail shuttles, regional VDC, and it's just about 50 kilometers to the west of Querétaro. So we're really excited about that project.
So that would address some of the concerns Susanne has about, she don't want to dwell things, but she wants to move it out of the country. So hopefully for the customers that geographically that's attractive to, it's going to help those customers expedite product out of the country. And she talked about vandalism, so I would assume cars that are moving don't get vandalized, so this would work out in that area. So
absolutely.
Right. All right. So Roberto, you got the first question from the audience that was sent in. And so they're asking about the US-Mexico-Canadian agreement that was signed earlier. So many things have changed from a regulation perspective. So does this have an impact on the companies that, like yourself, providing services within the market? Any thoughts? Good question. Yeah. Whoever said that has a good question.
It is. There's a couple of things here. The USMCA was signed, of course, and with different. You would think it was about the same in the beginning, but it really isn't. There's some important changes there from a regulation perspective. Workforce and unions specifically, and also, as you probably know, you guys know, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, there's a new administration in Mexico, and things are changing rapidly from a regulation perspective. Just to give you an example, a couple of months ago, there was changes to the laws when it comes to outsourcing people for services. So right now there's an express prohibition to outsource personnel outside of your corporate purpose, right? So companies, like the usual suspects that are dedicated to this type of services, they will no longer be able to hire those folks, that people. So that's good. That has the potential to reshape the industry and the labor industry. And we, as a vehicle processor, as an OEM, you use a lot of people for your processes. So that's really impacting the industry, and also the unions are becoming more active in Mexico in all different industries, in all different areas, and that poses other set of challenges. And you probably seen it in the news, and the arbitrage now from the US or Canada towards unions in Mexico, towards processes in Mexico, has increased as well. So you can see just from there how things are changing, and from a labor perspective, you have to comply with a new set of rules, and you just have to adjust to it, and adjust your the way you hire, you handle your labor. Big changes, by all means.
Wow, very good. Good response to that question. Susanne, we got a question for you from our viewers, and it's so what's the outlook on the EV transport, future outlook and requirements for EV? Because you guys are introducing a lot of new EV products. I know this is probably a hot button for Volkswagen, huh?
I love them, and just referring to your analogy to red wine, there are of course also some cars that are beautiful, getting older and older. I have one of these, unfortunately, but the EV is of course something pretty new for us, so we have to learn how to handle them. Right. We have to learn how to treat them. It's completely different if you don't have a combustion engine. What do you do if it runs out of battery at your location? It arrives, it's on the ship, you want to unload it, it doesn't have battery. What do you do? What are the emergency processes, etc.? So we are pretty much training our staff, trying to pre-see, forecast what can happen, what do we need in those processes. And we have beautiful cars. We have already the Porsche Macans, we have the Audi e-trons, and of course from Volkswagen the ID.4, which is a beautiful car. And I just can tell you, it's so much fun driving. You leave every motorbike behind, so it's something I hope is hitting the market pretty well in the US, and also of course I hope in Mexico and Canada. At this moment we are of course focusing on the US market, but Roberto and Alex, you I hope agree that we have to have also those electric cars in Mexico, and infrastructure we need. Clients, we need dealers that are trained to be able to explain and sell those cars. They are beautiful. Thank you.
I read the other day there's something like 90 plus new electric / hybrid models being introduced to the U.S. market over the next 30 months. So with all the different brands, 90 plus models, there's a lot of electric and hybrids headed up this way anyway. So Alex, you deal with facilities a lot. So the electric discussion has to come up with every customer that you're talking to.
It does, yes. And I'm not sure we've quite seen a consensus on the right way to approach this. Still, we've seen most people shy about a great big electric charging infrastructure at a facility, because if you want to be able to charge 150 cars at a time with a level 3 fast charger, you need a significant upgrade to your electrical service that goes all the way back to the utility. So we've got some ideas in thinking about how the electrical engineering of maybe a smarter system that's more tailored to a port or a distribution facility, as opposed to a retail environment where you really have to get the car out of there in an hour. A lot of times the car is sitting there, whether it sits there for 5 more minutes or whether it sits there for 30 more minutes sometimes it matters a lot, like on a ship or a rail car. But if you're in a port facility, it might not matter that much, and it might be better to just give it some trickle charge just to get it off the lot. So we haven't seen a consensus grow yet, but we're excited because it's coming up now, and just about every one of our new facility developments, they start to say, we need extra panel space. We need to start thinking about this, and we're starting to get talking a little more inside the OEMs about their different electric charging programs and how they work with the vehicles themselves. So
it's coming up. Every OEM meeting you go to, it's coming up.
Yep, it's starting to come up every single time.
So solar panels, is it in the same discussion? So facilities, are they talking solar panels too?
Absolutely. Solar panels are interesting and could become a part of this equation. You have to deal with how the energy being produced often is more of an offset, like at the grid and utility level compared to directly powering the cars, because storing energy is also very expensive and you really can't store that much. So that I agree, Dennis, that's a really interesting component. And I think that's going to be especially interesting in Mexico, which has a really different utility and rate situation than the US does.
Right. Now, big opportunity. And I know, and we talked before on covered parking and then integrating the panels of the parking. I mean, there's so many different options and ideas along this line that I know you guys are having dialogue with different customers, I would imagine.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Roberto. So the electric hybrid discussion from a handling standpoint has to change the math for you guys of how many cars you can handle and how you handle them and all this. I mean, that does that put an additional pressure, I guess, on your facilities or your staffing, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, I think just from a logistics standpoint, the moving of the vehicles, the distribution, it doesn't really change things a lot. The charging of it, of course, and the storing and on all those facilities, absolutely. We have the opportunity to be vehicle processors for a plant in Guadalajara in Mexico that is producing electric vehicles, and we're processing those vehicles now. Just from a logistics standpoint, Dennis, I think it's not a big difference, right? It's just the driving of the vehicle. There's the charging stations. I mean, again, from a logistics standpoint, I don't see a big difference.
Okay.
I think just Mexico specifically, it's gonna take a lot more time for electric vehicles to form, an important component of the overall sales in Mexico, right? It just as Susanne was saying in the beginning, it's a big country with big infrastructure needs and needs that are gonna come before electrification. It will come for sure, but this is in Scandinavia, right? Where the percentage of vehicles. It's just massive, and they have these aggressive targets that I'm sure they're gonna meet. I've been there, I've seen it. It's just incredible. That's not gonna happen in Mexico soon. I mean, it'll take some time, but it's already there. It's coming up in the discussions, but that's gonna take some time still.
Well, I'll tell you, the pendulum from all of these ICE products, internal combustion engine vehicles, moving to the electric/hybrid thing. And I think Volvo is one of the brands who they picked out a date, and they said as of, I think it's 2030. Does that sound right to the group? They're only going to provide electric powered vehicles, but every OEM brand is starting to march towards moving away from the normal gasoline combustion engines. So it's a change each of us will be dealing with here pretty rapidly as time progresses. So we're getting down to the last 10 minutes, and I don't want to ignore Peter. Peter, did you have any questions for the panel?
A couple, really. One for Alex more. Given sort of, we're pretty windy around the ports in the UK. So would you not be looking at wind turbines to actually boost for the energy?
So I think that's something that can definitely be studied. There probably is an instance somewhere in the world of wind turbines being oriented into automobile terminals. Now, I think you would probably just be looking at a few on even a relatively large site. And sometimes the challenge with that is that you lose a little bit of your flexibility in the facility. The nice thing about automotive is it's, at least in North America, it's a relatively low land investment or cost per acre for development. And sometimes port authorities are eyeing a different use in the long term for that, or at least the ability to flex out of that. So I think that might be one consideration. But I think to your point, I think all the options should be on the table there with regard to how we can have these facilities not just be a drain of energy as we begin to see, I think, more energy demand as a result of electrification. Yeah, there's definitely some opportunities for synergies there with renewables. And I feel like Susanne was itching to say something back as we were talking about renewables earlier. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And I really appreciate that because have you thought also of electric vehicles as being a storage possibility for electricity? Because this is what I always think, and I'm a little bit investigating how could we make that, because there are huge storages there. And so we can use also to electric vehicle batteries to storage temporarily electricity and use it in the logistic process somehow, or use peaks of energy supply when we have wind or when we have a lot of sun around here. And so why not try really to work on these innovative concepts?
That could be extremely innovative and cool because, you know, as I was saying, with solar and with wind and a lot of the renewables, you end up with a really big difference in when the energy is produced and when it's consumed. And if you were to be plugging it into automobiles and having those be the place where that energy is stored, I believe Ford is doing this with their new F-150 truck, where you can actually connect it to, like, say, an RV or something like that, and provide, almost pretending the car is a generator. Of course, you're burning a lot of your battery consumption as you do that. And I think what you're talking about would definitely be the next level, doing that on kind of an industrial scale at one of our facilities. To Roberto's point, I think we'll see it on the other side of the pond when that first happens. But
utilize
it's a cool idea.
Vehicle to grid with pushing the power back to the grid. So effectively, if you use the power at its cheapest time and give it back to the grid and earn on it, which should help with an element of the infrastructure then. Because we're looking at that here. If energy consumption is, in the UK, peak time is around when people get home from work and of course everything goes on in the house. So you could push your vehicle's energy, battery, back to the grid, where they will pay you a higher rate than when you're downloading it in the evening when they're not doing anything else. So that, I think, is a massive opportunity. You know, we are going to go to, you've got hybrids will be the only ICE option from 2030 over here. You will not be able to buy a petrol or diesel vehicle unless it's a hybrid in England by 2030. That's 8.5 years away. Yeah, and hybrids in 2035 will have gone from a new car lot. So the scaling up for EVs is pretty colossal when you think they're not touching 5% of the market yet. So we've got some real, I've got some challenges, but we've got some great opportunities on this. You know, Volkswagen, to be fair, have the most phenomenal range, and it's ever growing. Yeah, but you've also got weight constraints on the haul away side, haven't you? And especially if you bring, when they get totally electric Bentleys coming over, then boy, is that going to be heavy. You know,
I'll make the proposal. Thank you, Peter.
Weight loading of Bentleys on, and the Bentayga at the side of a spur looks like a small car. Well, so how heavy is a spur when it's all electric going to be? And how many you're going to be able to get on? So that's good, but I think we've got to be prepared to scale up faster than we're doing. And we've got to try every option. And also remember, though, when they catch fire, you've got a problem. You really have. So you've got to be able to isolate. Having said that, at Volkswagen, you're looking more solid state batteries as well, exploring for the future, which don't catch fire the same as a lithium-ion battery would. So to me, it really is phenomenally interesting. And the connectivity, though, with the infrastructure and everything you guys are doing are really what's going to drive everything forward. And I've got to stop because otherwise I'm eating up into your time, and I could sit and listen to you guys for, I said earlier, 45 minutes is probably optimum. Well, I could listen to you guys for 4 to 5 days, in all honesty, because there's really so much happening. So we're sorry, Dennis, for
no, you're good. So we're down to our last 5 minutes, Peter, and for the panel, 5 minutes. And so Susanne, let me turn to you. We talked about you're trying to do some optimization activities with your network. Is the lineup of having electrics in your, adding new electric cars to your lineup, is that affecting some of your discussions or impacting the discussions on optimization?
No, it's aligned with this strategy. We move them as fast as the other cars. We are taking, of course, all the precautions, and yeah, not anymore. But I have seen a battery burning in a raw state some days ago, years ago. It's nothing funny. So we are preparing, but it's not affecting our strategy. We have optimized our processes, are working very accurately, and we'll just integrate these new things into our process.
Very good. Alex, last question for you is so what are some of the challenges you're seeing in Mexico on the land side? Anything unique or different that you can share with us?
So yeah, when it comes to the act of kind of developing a facility in Mexico, you'll often hear someone like me saying that it's like a fundamentally different thing than it would be building in the United States. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. One is the zoning or environmental designation of the land. You have a lot of very active government organizations like CONAGUA, SCT, that have to be coordinated with. You'll have environmental documents that have to be made. And this will often be the case if we're talking about like a large scale solar and electrification project at an existing facility. You still might be having to create a MIA or an environmental document for that. The utilities and roadways can be also a major constraint if they aren't really worked out in an ironclad way before the project begins. You might end up with problems years down the line as your roadway access. A road that is a country road 10 years ago can be extremely congested at that point in time. And also the land market in Mexico. Most of the land in Mexico, I think like 70% or something, is part of cooperative land ownership that can't be developed. That causes the development of a new facility, and the land that a new facility sits on, we usually say about 2 to 4 times the cost for the land itself, raw industrial land, compared with the United States. So you have to be very clever, and you can't use, you can't just go into a city and assume that you're going to be able to, buy land in an industrial park. And often that's really unfeasibly expensive, especially for our business.
Right. And so I assume the property of the project we talked about earlier, you got the railroad access in place, you got close proximity to great highways. And so for customers, Susanne or whoever it might be, you've addressed to try and optimize, to use, Susanne's theme, to optimize product flow through that facility.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it comes down to having a local partnership, which is so important in Mexico. Yeah. Someone who really understands and is performing on all those different functions right now with their existing facility. So that's really what we sought to identify in this. Right. And the connection to the Kansas City, Southern New Mexico is also, it's, a nice, good railroad connection that's functional and can be scaled up is also really important.
Awesome. So Roberto, I'm going to close with you. We just have about a minute or so left. And so are we at the bottom of the valley on the CPU thing and the COVID thing, or are we headed out of the valley in Mexico? Is tomorrow's going to be better, I guess is my question. We got fingers crossed. We have fingers crossed.
If I had a crystal ball, it feels now as if, you know, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We definitely, you know, I mean, you guys in the US are seeing it right now with the CDC saying you can be without a mask if you're vaccinated. You know, with the number of cases down and possibly a fourth wave of COVID being avoided.
Right.
It feels like that in Mexico a little. You know, cases are down, hospitalizations are down, deaths are down, fortunately. So it feels that way. Of course, you know, you go to the streets and it's like sometimes you feel as if it's like nothing. If it's like pre-pandemics, right? So I think we still need to be careful. We're still keeping our safety protocols. We have all that in place. We're not going to lower our guard, but it feels that way. Dennis, to answer your question, it feels as if we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and probably second half of the year will be a lot better from a volume, from a production standpoint.
I understand. And good response, sir. Thank you. I want to. We've run out of time, unfortunately. I want to thank our panel today for joining me in this discussion about Mexico. Excellent conversation. Each one of you did a great job, and I truly appreciate your support today. And Peter, I'm going to turn it back to you, if I can, please.
Thank you. Well, thank you all, really. That was an absolutely superb panel. Sort of, I probably shouldn't ask, but I'd really like to get you guys back again without too distant future and go into a part 2 for this episode, because it could and still has lots and lots that we could talk about.
Yeah.
And we haven't even touched on at the moment the fact that we touched on Volvo a short while ago. Well, Volvo's Polestar is sold online and will never touch a dealer. So the question will be, will that happen across other brands with certain vehicle product derivatives, as I'll call them? And how would we then cope with that moving forward? You know, would it happen more at the port or with Roberto, and then it's white gloved wherever it is somewhere else? But that's for another day, and everyone's going to be doing this in the background to me because we're two minutes over. But thank you all. Please let's keep in touch, and really appreciated it. Many thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Hi, it's Peter again, and thank you for watching the session. Don't forget you can connect with all members within the EV community. Send messages to each other and start to build relationships for the future. Also, take a look at our supplier showrooms. Our partners have got lots of products and services that they have to offer, which again could be of benefit to you. Make the most of the opportunity, and thank you again for joining us.